So now I got a pretty good idea of what I'm up to, telling stories. And that's not just telling stories, it's finding stories that deserve to be told, that need to be told. And then what you do when there are people who have wonderful, powerful stories in them, but don't have a way to tell them, you know, because the kids never asked them. Mostly people are never asked questions. Working people seldom get asked questions. The question they get asked is, why are you late? And how soon can you get it out? Isn't that true? Well, the people who if you're not asked questions, you're not used to answering them, you know. And so they have all these carrying around locked up in you. Your memories, your recollections, the triumph of your own life, the degradation of your own life. And nobody's asking about it. So all you do is ruminate it or push it down or push it down. You find people like that, you take your time. You're not there to collect stories. Put down a tape recorder, you're talking to this. You're there to make a friend. See, because that friend has something important that you want to know. Everybody in the world knows something you don't know. And the only way you're going to find out is to ask, isn't that a fact? So you're going to make a friend, and you're going to go visit them time and again. You're going to go out for a cup of coffee. You're going to go share some food together. And finally, when that person begins to understand that you really mean it, that you're not just curious, that you really want to know these stories, that these stories are important to you, what is the substance of your life? What is the truth of your life? Tell it to me. I remember sitting with Gail I. Gardner. 96 years old. I sat with her in the hospital room in Prescott. I was driving through Prescott on my way to visit Katie Lee down in Jerome, Arizona, to give me her father's watch. Stopped off in Prescott. Now, I had met Gail Gardner when he was 75 years old at a Smithsonian Folk Festival up in Montreal. Tiny little man with a big Stetson hat and a silver-top cane. He was old when I met him. Well, I was driving through Prescott. I saw a sign said Gail I. Gardner Avenue. I thought, well, I know that man. They named the street after him. I know that man. I went to the Charlotte Hall Museum there to see the sign. Said to the woman behind the counter, Mr. Gardner would happen to be alive, would he? She said, oh, yeah, he's 96. He's over in the hospital now and ailing. He'll probably never go back to the ranch. I went and spent the afternoon with him. Why? Because he had written songs and stories after the turn of the century that became stock and trade of cowboys all over North America. You know, the Orahana Bull, tying knots from the devil's tail. He knew he'd written those. People didn't even know anymore that he'd made those things up. They were just fallen into tradition. And there he was, sunken down into his chair. Just a big dome bald head, big thick eyeglasses, one lens shaded, the other one magnifying a empty socket in a grotesque sort of way. They'd taken away parts of his nose and his ears because of frostbite and cancer from working under the sun in the snows of the high plains. He was a cattle rancher and he was a horse rancher, and that's what he knew. Okay, now with somebody like that, every surface in his room, his windowsills, everything was covered with an American Opinion Library pamphlets, American Conservative Party pamphlets and tracts and things like that, you see? Now, am I going to sit in front of Mr. Gardner and ask him how he feels about homelessness or how he feels about communists? I'll get some canned rap out of those magazines, won't I? No, I'm going to ask him about wind. I'm going to ask him about sand. I'm going to ask him about cows. And you know what? He'll tell me the truth. He'll tell me the truth of his life. Well, what everybody knows, the truth of their life, they know their tools, they know their work, they know their kin, they know their neighborhood. So that's what you ask about. That's what you ask about. It's the truth of somebody's life. What they authentically know, instead of asking things about what you think they might know. And you take those answers in, then you roll them over in your mind. I do it in the garden or when I'm walking. I do it somewhere where there's rhythm, especially the rhythm of walking. And I take the words that I've heard and I change and turn them. Not a whole lot, but just enough so that they have rhythm and a beat and a continuity, so that then I can sit in front of people and tell those stories in a more or less coherent way without a lot of starts and stops. And to me, that's just simply become a way of life, that every place I go, the stories are there and they're waiting to be told. And I've become a very, very good listener. And then I go home and create architecture for those stories and then fill it all in and go about and tell them. Now, to this point, are there any questions about this? I think I got a pretty good idea what I'm up to. Huh? Well, I would like to do the next part of this. This is the part I really sat and thought about. What I've just been doing here, I didn't think about much. It's a little bit coming up here. I mean, I don't know where I'm going to be or who I'm going to be with now, do I?
Bruce, I can disappear.
Oh,
Yeah.
This part I made notes on. Yes, I can write. I love books, but I keep books in their place. See, because my books, my history books, are safe for the people around me, and it's out of them, out of the people around me, that I got a history, a working class history, verse and chapter, that's more beautiful and more powerful and more entertaining and ultimately more useful than the best history book I ever read. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it. But now, creating stories out of other stories, I wanted to go over some ideas that I had about that I've stumbled across traveling about. And a lot of it I learned when I was a kid, because my father, Sid Cohen, managed the last vaudeville house in Cleveland, the Hippodrome. And then he moved us west, and he managed theaters in Salt Lake City. That's where we moved west in '47. And so it was a lot of hanging out backstage and listening to show people talk and being able to ask them questions. Great storytellers like Myron Cohen. Anybody remember Myron Cohen? The great Yiddish storyteller. I mean, he was an elegant human being. So what I did was I just sat down and I said, okay, you have the substance of stories, you have listening, you have asking real non-rhetorical questions where you really want to know the answers so that you can build the kind of trust that you need for people to give you their stories. What are the tactics of storytelling? Just the tactics. What are the nuts and bolts of it? And then I sat and I thought about that, and I say, remember Sir Laurence Olivier when he was the great British actor, Shakespearean actor, when he was interviewed on television. And he was a technique actor, not a method actor. He's a technique actor, where he used techniques to act. Remember, he did a movie with Dustin Hoffman. I don't know the name of the movie, but it's one where he's a dentist filing on Hoffman's teeth, and it hurts real bad. Before they filmed that scene, he said Dustin Hoffman came onto the set looking absolutely terrible. And he said, what happened? He said, well, I wanted to live the part. Hoffman's a method actor. He said, I want to really feel and live the part, so I've been starving myself and walking the streets for 3 days. And Laurence Olivier said, my dear young man, why don't you try acting? It's so much easier. That's a technique actor, you see. So here's this technique actor, and the interview is saying, tell us how you do that. And he looked at him and said, are you wearing a watch? He said, yes, I'm wearing a watch. He didn't ask the watchmaker how he made it. And then he just shut up. Guy got the point, too. Nonetheless, I'm going to give you some ideas about changing stories, transforming stories, or creating your own. The two great reservoirs of untapped stories in this culture are excuses. I mean, you know what I mean. When you were when you were 13 years old and tried to explain to your mother why the library was open at 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we're all storytellers. We all, making up, the time we're little, we're making up these elaborate excuses. And there's a whole big reservoir of untapped stories. The other big reservoir of untapped stories is, for want of a better nomenclature, dumb bar stories. I mean, you're in a bar, you want to have a quiet drink, get hung up by somebody who said, "Did you hear the one about," and then lays some greasy story, some sexist, racist story, some story you ought to turn around and walk out on, except that, but the inveterate storyteller